Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader. This is Sleepy Vlog number 84. I've done 84 of these things, but haven't done very many recently. If you haven't seen me do this before or just can't remember why I do something called a Sleepy Vlog, when everything I do is a vlog, Sleepy Vlogs are an excuse to ramble. Thoughts bouncing around in my head that I want to throw out there. Maybe they'll cohere to a certain degree or maybe they will not. Lately, the biggest thing on my mind has been the effect of the economy on the comic book business, the effect of the kind of collapse of the economy, you might say, whatever going on, the quarantining of the economy, and also a changing point of view of my own self as comics as a hobby. I was suddenly realized, actually before all this began, but now it's even stronger, that comic book, the Wednesday warrior, the picking up comic books every week and reading them that week and being interested in what the very new comics are that are coming out, is a hobby in and of itself. It's not a necessity. It's something fun that I do. You feel attached to your hobbies. They have personal meaning for you, even if they are not important in the bigger picture of the world. Although me having that as a hobby is important to some people's livelihood. But that's just economics, right? Everything we do is important to someone's livelihood. So anyway, I've been bouncing around that stuff in my mind. But before I go too deep into that, on eBay, another part of my hobby is buying original art. And I was looking around on eBay for John Buscema artwork, and none of it was at prices that I thought was reasonable. And but then there were a lot of these, what do they call them? Production stats or what have you, the things. Now, are those really one of a kind? I went ahead and bought two that just weren't too expensive. I think they were about $11 or $12 a piece. So this one is from a John Buscema Fantastic Four. I've now forgotten which issue. And it seems, I don't know if is this what they did after that they got from the printer to check that all the colors looked all right? And is this really one of a kind, or have I bought something that there's really hundreds of copies out there, or anyone can make more copies of it? I don't know. It was cheap enough to just see. I often see these things on eBay, not usually, well, at a few of the original art websites, but on eBay, a lot of them. So I thought, at the very worst, it's a nice little decoration to hang up on my wall. And the other one I got was black and white, and it seems, I haven't taken it out of here. So this is from a 1960s Silver Surfer. I've also forgotten which issue. Somewhere pretty early in the run, I have a feeling. And so it's some kind of production item. Or is it really? I just don't even know if I'm being ripped off or what the significance of these things is. I mean, there are some that people are trying to sell for like $250, or, the prices ranged all over the place. The more expensive ones were obviously from issues or pieces by artists that people were particularly excited about. Let me take this out of the wrapper. I'm just curious. Oh yeah, look at that. Huh, that's interesting. As I pulled it, it started to come apart. This is some kind of overlay. And there's dialogue. So I don't know if these are somehow part of the printing process or what the story is here. I really don't know. I probably am getting fingerprints on it. I probably should be more careful. So that's kind of cool. Maybe someone out there knows what these things are, or maybe I should research them more. Oh, and look, the word balloons are there without the words. And this other sheet is just the words, not even the balloons. Fascinating. I don't know what that means. Because they're all black and white, so in terms of a printer, they would all go together, right? I wonder what this is for. Oh, now I've got the words flipped around. That's funny. Oh, and now they don't line up. I wonder what I've done wrong. Okay, well, I'll have to figure that out more later. I guess I should have done these in a separate video because there's nothing else that connects them with the rest of this stuff. Except that maybe I've been more active in my anxiety that comics are going away, more active in my online purchasing. In my shop, right after it closed, my last day seeing my shop owner, he was very concerned and not knowing if he could get a loan and kind of upset that big businesses are getting actual direct aid and small businesses loans. He's a very small business, one guy plus, a few part-time hours of some other employees, but really not very many employees, and they don't put in a lot of time. So he immediately, to keep his cash flow going, I guess, put a sale on his website. He sells the nicer quality comics for more than I really want to pay. But with the sale prices and just my sentimentality about wanting to keep his shop going, I looked there for things I might want and spent a little more per individual issue than I normally would. But I can afford it if I want to. So I got another copy. This might be my third copy or might be my second copy. I bought 3 total, but the first one I bought I was very unhappy with because of weird staple positioning. But this is the very first comic I read as a kid. I bought and read as a kid when I was 10 years old. Had a huge impact on me. Roy Thomas, Neil Adams, the beginning of the Kree-Skrull War, although I had no idea that's what it was. But it was super cool and awesome, so I kind of wanted an extra copy of it and a nice copy. It looks pretty nice, at least in the Mylar. I haven't opened it up yet. Then this is the last issue of Superman before they rebooted it after the Infinite Crisis, or Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the whole John Byrne thing. But also it has a awesome Alan Moore story, which I've read in collections but never owned the individual issue. So I thought that was worth getting. And then I just grabbed this one of these 80-page Silver Age giants of Superboy, because I have read very little Silver Age Superboy. I've mostly read a lot of Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, and of course Action Comics and Superman. So I just thought it would be fun to grab that. Again, just kind of looking around for stuff that I might want that would also help out the shop owner, while he's struggling financially. And so I also got this issue of DC Showcase Presents The Spectre, a book-length spectacular beyond the sinister barrier. It's such a weird cover. But I've been wanting to get into the Spectre, and I thought it would be fun to get this Silver Age Spectre and see what it's all about. I had cheaply bought 2 or 3 other issues of Nightmaster in Preview Showcase. And this is his first appearance, and I guess in nicer condition also, so it was a bit more spendy. But I figured, what the hell, I knew I wanted to get this issue at some point. I got the other issues pretty cheap. And then finally, and it's not the oldest comic item I own, because I think I own some older, I know I owe some older Spirit sections, but this may be the oldest traditional comic I own. It's from 1949. It's Daredevil. I did not notice when I ordered it that it had an X on the cover. I'm not keen about that. But it is very old, Golden Age comic. And there used to be a hero named Daredevil from this, from Lev Gleason. Lev Gleason publisher, produced by Charles Biro, who was kind of a famous Golden Age artist. But there used to be, this was the magazine starring the hero Daredevil, and he often fought the Yellow Claw. Daredevil was wore one of those red and black suits, like it. I can't describe it. Anyway, a red and black suit. I don't know if he had any powers. He had a boomerang. I don't think I've ever actually read a Daredevil comic, but I remember reading histories of comics when I was a kid, and they talked a lot about Daredevil, and they talked about how eventually the kid gangs that were friends of Daredevil started taking over the book more and more, to the point where Daredevil disappeared from the book. So this is a comic mostly about kid gangs and adventures of kids. So I thought that kind of gave me a kick to own that when I saw that on his website, and it wasn't too much money, not at all. It was one of the cheaper comics I bought, I think. But it's funny also to me that it just says Lev Gleason publisher on it rather than the company having a name. The Little Wise Guys. So, flipping through it, it looks like it has a variety of comics styles, and even kind of an Archie-looking comic. Stuff taking place in high school. Here's the Little Wise Guys. So anyway, I look forward to reading this, and that was a lot of fun. And so that was one of my ways of supporting my shop. And then a week later, he sent out more emails, and one of the things he mentioned was you could get gift cards. And I thought, well, I actually do want to give out gifts, comic book related gifts, to certain friends. So I'll buy the gift cards now and give them away later, at least when comic book shops are open again, and if not even later than that. So that's, free money for a while, like a loan for the comic book shop. So I got these 3 cards. I know who I'm going to give 2 of them. I know 2 different people I'm going to give 2 of them to, and I haven't made up my mind on the third yet, but I've got plenty of time. It might end up being my daughter. If no one else, I can just give her this, and then instead of her asking me, can I have that one or can I have that one, I could say, yeah, if you have enough money on your card. So, someone on Twitter mentioned at one point, if your biggest concern right now is comics, then you're very fortunate. And I am very fortunate. And I have other bigger concerns about life, and I'm trying to help out the comic book shop a little bit, but I'm giving to charities that help the homeless, because I think the homeless are even more kind of stuck out on their own without any support during this time. So I dug deep in my charitable giving to a couple of different homeless organizations that have been suggested to me by people who know more than I do about the homeless situation. So, even before there was all this, loss of this hobby, I was thinking, like I said, about how, hey, wait a minute. One of my hobbies, or a big part of this hobby, for me, and for some other people, but definitely for me, it feels like it's a hobby to go out and get the new comics each week and explore that and engage with that. And I thought about that a lot when I heard an interview with one of the publishers of Bad Idea Comics, who are about to put out a bunch of comic books. They're going to be thicker and than your average, more pages than your average comic book, they say. And their first comic is going to be a Matt Kint comic, and with an artist who I can't think of right at the moment, but an artist whose work I've liked at Valiant Comics. Though some of the Bad Idea people used to be at Valiant, and when Valiant got bought up by some Chinese company, they got a lot of money, and they're now rich, and they can do, I'm extrapolating, but they kind of admitted that they can do this kind of less profitable approach to starting a comic book company, which is why they called it Bad Idea. And their basic idea is they're going to do no trade collections and no digital whatsoever, and they're going to only sell their comics in certain shops, and they're going to roll it out. They're going to roll out their first wave of comics. They originally planned to only 20 comic book shops in the whole country. Now it turned out, later it turned out that there were so many comic book shops interested that it's going to be 100 comic book shops rolled out to. And I think there's like 2,500 comic book shops in the country. Is that right? I'm not 100% positive. And they could not be comic book shops like DCBS. But so they're kind of playing with us, I felt. Like, wait a minute. And in the interviewer wisely kept coming back to, this is kind of weird to make comic books less accessible. And he was saying, people who really love comics love the hunt, and they'll hunt down these comics. They'll find ways to get it. We'll allow the shops we do give the comics to sell them online. So I'm like, they want to make it harder for me to get comics. They're playing with me. They're playing with me enjoying this hobby of getting the comics when they first come out. I don't want to wait because part of my hobby is getting the comics that week. It's just fun. You get the comics that week. You talk about them with your friends, for me on YouTube. And then you get the next comics the next week, and you kind of plan what comics you're going to get, and you try new comics, and you try to figure out what's going on that might be interesting. And so that really irritated me, and it made me realize, as I was feeling like I was being played, that this is a hobby for me, and a hobby is something that is just for fun, but it's important to you. You make it important. You make it something that you have as a focus on your life. And they're playing with that focus and making it hard for me to get it. And also claiming that they will never come out in trade. Potentially, I will never get these comics and not come out in digital. Or I'll have to pay a lot extra for them or something like that. And I can see as playing a long game. And another thing, the shops, the elite shops who get the comics had to do certain things that Bad Idea Comics demanded, like having promotional stands and things and posters up in their shops about the Bad Idea Comics. So I guess it's great for those shops that are the chosen ones because it gives them a little edge in this, on the edge kind of business that they're in. And so it just really irritated me, and it felt like a bad idea, a mean idea in a way. But I kind of understood because they want to. There's a lot of small comic book publishers out there, and they wanted to make something about themselves stand out. Ideally, you would stand out by having some really great comics, but they wanted their whole line of comics to stand out rather than just maybe one great comic that they might have, if that makes sense. So then come along now, we have Diamond closing, the comic book wholesaler. I think the printing presses have closed that would have printed DC Comics and probably others. I just happened to hear about the DC one. And slowly the comic book industry has come around to the idea that they should not release the digital comics when they can't release the comics to the comic book shops. And at first I thought that makes a lot of sense, and we need to protect the comic book stores, and so that's a good idea. Put everything on pause. And part of my shifting on this idea is, one, I was thinking, at first I thought, well, this will be a month or two. Now I think it might be 3 months or 4 months. I don't know how many businesses will survive at all after that long without any cash flow. But anyway, it seems already like it's going to go on at least 2 months. And I gather from, there was an attempt by somebody to start up a system where you can buy digital comics and later pick up the physical at your shops, but the shops nixed that because they were still afraid that everybody would be converted to digital. So we don't want to, from the point of view of the shops, we don't want to release things digitally when you can't get them at the shops, because all of us hobbyists, people who want the comics right away, will become converted to digital and we won't come back to the shops. And then I had like a talk online with somebody on Twitter about how he felt it would be unfair for digital readers to get their comics when he, as a purely physical reader, would not be able to get them. And suddenly that struck me as a little silly, because what about, there's always unfairness in life, and if I'm suffering, those guys should suffer too, is kind of a weird attitude. And then I thought about it some more, and I saw some promotion of the fact, you can get Marvel's Unlimited digital thing, Marvel Unlimited, for free for a month. And they're promoting, hey, everyone, go do that. And Marvel's adding some extra features to it right at the moment, supposedly. I'm already a Marvel Unlimited subscriber. And I have been thinking about now I'll spend more time digging into Marvel Unlimited. But what I would have liked, what I probably would have done, is if the digital comics kept coming out, my most favorite comics I would have bought digitally, and then I still would have picked them up later physically at my store. Because in this crisis and this fear of losing my comic book hobby, I'm willing to pay more. I'm willing to double dip that way, at least on some of the comics that I would have picked up during the weeks that the comic book shops are closed. And also because I feel sad not having that weekly churn of the comic books and having my hobby interrupted. So it would have been a way to have some continuity. And I feel like I'm now starting to feel like the shops have made a big mistake in pressing for that. Because in my own digital reading experience, digital has made me go back to the shops. I got an iPad in 2010 because I loved the idea of an iPad. So I was an early adopter and started reading comics digitally. And that soon got me on the wanting to get the new comics of each week. And then realizing I'd rather get them at the comic book shop, and then going to the comic book shop and getting discounts that I couldn't get digitally. So what I think is that the comic book shops are wrong, and the general belief is wrong, that having the weekly comics available digitally is going to maintain or increase an interest in the weekly churn of comics. And when the comic book shops reopen, anybody who likes physical comics will come back, and some other people might come in who've been reading digital comics and say, hey, I want to get the physical ones because they're better and maybe even cheaper. So I think what the real danger to comic book shops is that things like the Marvel Unlimited app, the DC Universe app, the all-you-can-eat thing that they have over at Comixology, although that's less complete than things like Marvel Unlimited, because those are so cheap that they do tempt you to say, well, why not just wait 6 months and pay like $7 a month if you buy the yearly membership. I just had my yearly membership renew, and it was $69. And that's less than $7 a month. That's probably $6 a month, roughly. So that's the real danger. But I think buying like individual issues on Comixology is actually going to help shops and strengthen them. I hear a lot of people now talking more about Hulu. Hulu, you're limited in the number of things you can buy, but also these more unlimited things where it doesn't, you almost think of Marvel Unlimited as free. You pay $70 and then for the rest of the year you read free comics. I think that's a big danger. So I think that that not releasing weekly comics might actually mean less people return to the comic book stores at the end of all this, whenever it ends. And on top of that, all this worry about the comic book shop, but most of the people producing comic books, particularly the ones not for Marvel and DC, they're all freelancers, or almost all freelancers, and the ones not producing for Marvel and DC don't have a big company who can pay them checks for things they can't publish. At Image Comics, I think almost everybody gets, mostly lives on royalties after the fact, after the comic has sold. So without comics out there selling, they are going broke. They're going bankrupt. They'll have to move on. I think we're going to see a lot of comic book series and comic book creators not being able to make it through this, or having to change their direction. And why is their suffering less important? So if they can make some money off digital, and probably there will be more money to be made in digital during this shutdown, but I still think the money will go back to the comic book shops, and more likely to go back to the comic book shops if everyone is still maintaining their kind of hobby. So along with some people, I think, then saying, why not just do Marvel Unlimited, a lot of others might say, well, I'm being bumped out of this habit of buying my weekly comics. Maybe I'll just wait for the trade. And a lot less people are buying trades at stores than are buying floppies. A lot of us, myself included, buy a lot of their trades online, which again is not helping out the comic book shops. So I just think that this whole movement has been misguided. It'd be interesting to see if I'm right. There's a whole bunch of other questions about Diamond Comics and whether they will survive this, and whether people will start looking for other distributors. I'm guessing that that's a very tricky thing. Before you had Diamond, before Diamond had its monopoly, and you had a lot of comic book wholesalers to the direct market, I think most of them were small businesses, almost mom and pop. And so it's not easy. There's not a huge amount of profit to be made, I don't think, from being a comic book distributor. It's not like a whole bunch of super organized large companies want to come in and own their own comic book distribution companies. I might be wrong, but that's my impression. So people want an end to Diamond, but what is going to be the replacement for it, and how does that work? There's talk I've had with various people, like in live hangouts and elsewhere, that maybe the comic book companies can sell directly to the shops, because it originally was the direct market. Now it's actually an indirect market, but it's the market without the returns. So that I can imagine that working if there's some central catalog, like just a digital catalog maybe, that comic book shops can go to, that all the comic book companies are included in, and then the people in the shops can order stuff, and the orders go out to, okay, here's all my Ahoy comics, here's all my Vault comics. It's places like Ahoy and Vault and Oni Press and a bunch of other newer ones that you do wonder, like, how long can they survive without a cash flow? I think I just read that Image is laying off some of their people, and Lion Forge laid off everybody. And Lion Forge owns Oni, so I don't know how that's going to affect Oni. Or maybe Oni owns Lion Forge. I meant to be putting a whole bunch of comics up here as I talked, but I forgot to do that. So yeah, that's on my mind. I've always wondered, why is Marvel Unlimited so cheap? Because it really does. It has made me buy less back issues of Marvel, a few less trades of Marvel, and Marvel's comics and trades are amongst the most expensive. So, and yet their digital is the cheapest. And it's almost like they have a long-term plan to shift to entirely digital through a subscription service like that. Or they have it in place in case the physical market does collapse. They'll be in position to do a digital distribution solely on their own. Oh, excuse me. Swallowing the wrong way. One of my curses. So anyway, I guess that about sums up all my thoughts on that. I mean, I can see myself being someone who just does digital and trades if I don't really want to, because as I said, it's a very enjoyable part of my hobby. But I could see doing that and just collecting back issues and the like. I have lots of trades I haven't read because I'm usually distracted by the fun of reading the weekly comics I am getting. But, that could change. I was mostly a trade reader during the 2000s, and maybe even the late 90s, basically once trades became more common. So, yeah. But I don't want to be. I want to continue, and so I don't think I will break. I think I will be back at my comic book shop whenever it opens. But I can see in myself the possibility of other approaches, and so that's why I kind of think that they may have missed the bandwagon. So many things economically or politically may be changing as a result of all this craziness, and it's all totally unpredictable. So it's just me extrapolating in my own way, just based on my own self. Okay, well, thank you for sticking with me for 32 minutes. Pat yourself on the back. Know you're one of my best internet friends if you watched the whole way through. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.